Welcome to the Secret Underground Laboratory Recovery and Salvage, where rude mechanicals do magic. Hello, I'm Bronze Age. This is the Secret Underground Laboratory Recovery and Salvage's Father's Day special. Here in the lab, I fix things. I use carpentry, plumbing, welding, electrical, all manner of crafts to take something that's broken and put it back the way it should be. And lots of times people ask me where to learn all this stuff. And sometimes I say, well, once you've worked on cars for a living, everything in life is easy. And that's true, but it's not exactly the correct answer. The correct answer is I learned it all from my father. Now, he didn't teach me carpentry, although I did learn a lot about it from him. He didn't teach me electrical work. He didn't teach me how to weld or any of that other stuff. What he taught me was that this kind of thing was entirely possible. My father was born in 1929 on a small farm in North Carolina. It was so much in the middle of nowhere as that when he would tell people where he was from, he would say, I'm from Stanley County, North Carolina, because there was no city or town anywhere nearby large enough that he thought someone might actually recognize the name. And this was about 20, maybe 25 years before the electrical grid got to this particular piece of earth. And that meant that no electrical lights, which meant that no running water and no refrigeration. No running water is because you have to have a pump. And without electricity, there's no pump. All the water that they use was pulled out of a well with a bucket. Now, being out in the middle of nowhere, this farm was pretty much self sufficient. It could have been 1929, it could have been 1879. The technology they were using was not much different. There was a blacksmith forge, there was a sawmill, which was actually run by a Model T Ford engine. There were whatever else you needed, because if something broke or you needed to make something, you pretty much had to do it with whatever you had at hand. My father was too young to serve in World War II, but the draft was still active by the time he got to that age. And after my mother and he were married, um, he was drafted, went into the Army. It was an experience he didn't care for, but it made a big difference in everybody's life from then on. As he got out of the Army, he was able to use GI Bill benefits to pay for college. And I had been born by that time, and we ended up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he was working on a civil engineering degree. Now, one of my earliest experiences is I am probably 4 years old, maybe somewhere closer to five, not really sure. But the library at NC State, where he was going to school, had thrown out a pedestal table. Now, this was an unusual table. I've never seen another one like it. It had a steel pedestal, but the top was some sort of a black fiberboard. Now, I know it was black fiberboard because I've seen the inside of it. I was riding in the pickup truck. A friend of his had a truck. In between both of them, they had loaded the pedestal table in the back of the truck, and as they were taking off, it rolled out the back. Because, of course, being a pedestal table, they tend to be kind of top heavy. That was my first lesson on how to properly load a truck. But they grabbed it, put it back in there. I think they laid it on its side so that wouldn't happen again. And we took it back to the little small house where we were renting, not far off campus. Now, it was still usable as a table. One corner was kind of battered a good bit, but he had this, a wind zip saw, a couple pieces of scrap plywood that I don't know where he picked those up, but not difficult to come by, a hammer, chisel, and a few other modest hand tools. He cut that corner off, patched it with the plywood. Uh, I think it was attached with probably a screw and then epoxy to fill in the gaps. And once it was painted black, you honestly couldn't tell that it had ever been broken. Now, a few years later, we're in Vicksburg, Mississippi, where he had a job at the Corps of Engineers Waterways Experiment Station. My aunt was trying to set up her first apartment, and she needed a refrigerator. Another memory of mine is that we go to Sears, which at this time in Vicksburg was still a downtown store. The salesman took us to an alley back behind the store where I don't know if they were trade-ins or just whatever, but old refrigerators. And there was one that worked just fine. It cooled and all, but it was one of the old kind that had the big handle on the front that snapped closed and pulled it tight. The kind that they would warn you not to leave outside when you abandoned it because kids could get in it and suffocate because they thought it was a playhouse. In any case, the piece inside the door that that big hooked handle grabbed a hold of was broken. Not a problem. I don't know what he paid for it. It may have been only $5 or something like that. But it was soon back at our house. And again, he made a part out of plywood. This Craftsman 7-inch circular saw, a drill with a cord, of course, a file, and more plywood, he was able to fabricate a replacement part for the latch in the door. And that refrigerator served her well for quite a few years. And that was basically just the way it was in our home. Something broke, he fixed it. He did all the repairs on our cars, and I reluctantly helped him on most of them, never dreaming that that would someday be my actual career. But none of our neighbors did that. They took their cars to a shop. If a chair broke, it went out by the curb. It was thrown away. Now, I grew up believing that we were hardy, resourceful pioneer stock. And later I found out that we were just poor. Now, I am being facetious because we were never poor by any stretch of the imagination. There were times when cash was kind of tight. He got his doctorate while he was working there in Vicksburg and later became a professor of civil engineering at LSU in Baton Rouge. Now, that's basically a 9 month of the year kind of a job, but you could get work in the summer if you could start, teaching summer classes, or you could get a gig with a research project. And that usually wasn't a problem. But there was one summer when neither of those came through, and that basically meant about 2.5 months without a paycheck. And that's when the dryer went out. Poor people do not have dryers. But other than put a clothesline up in the backyard, he and I drug the dryer out into the carport, took the back off of it, and he found that the bearing that the drum spins on had gone out. And that was the source of all that horrible noise. Well, he takes a piece of pipe, a drill, a file, a grinder, and fabricates a bearing to substitute for the worn out one. Now, it lasted until September when the paycheck started again and Sears delivered a brand new dryer. Now, fast forward about 25 years, my dryer has the exact same problem. I know what to do. I'm not going to make another one, but I go take the thing apart, get the old part out of it, write down all the numbers, the model number, the serial number, the date of manufacturer. I've got every piece of information on this washing machine. I walk into the store that sells appliance parts, put my bearing on the counter, and just as I'm unfolding my piece of paper, the guy reaches behind to a shelf, pulls out the bearing, lays it right there beside mine. It's an identical match. Well, that was easy. How much is that? He goes, $7.50. $7.50. Now, I don't know what it would have cost in 1973, but I think we probably could have afforded it. One last story. My grandfather died when I was 12, and that meant that the farm would be broken up and anything that could be carried away would be auctioned off. So we took one last trip back to the farm to see if there was anything he wanted to take, keep, whatever. And going through the attic of the old house, we found this clock case. Now, it didn't look like this when we found it. It was basically black with alligator varnish. It had been up in the attic in the heat for probably 20, maybe 30 years. The clockwork was missing, but he recognized it. What it actually meant to him, I really don't know because I didn't have the good sense to ask. but it was clearly had quite a good bit of sentimental value. So we brought it back home to Louisiana, and he very carefully, painstakingly stripped all the old varnish off of it, and then with dental picks cleaned it out of all of these carvings, stained it, and then varnished it. And I think he wanted to find another clock work for it. That just basically never happened. So when he died, I found it in this condition. Now what I want to do today is turn this clock cabinet into a memory cabinet. I don't want to make any modifications to the original cabinet, so what I do here is got to slip in. And I have got a pile of oak that's been salvaged from pallets, something my father would be very proud of. And I'm going to try and use the techniques I think he would have used if he was back on the farm and taking on this same kind of a job. All right, got the bench cleaned off. Let's see how this is going to fit. Well, that looks nice. Now, a memory cabinet, has to have memories. So the first memory we're going to put in here is a 1/4-inch nut driver with a wooden handle. Here on the shaft it says 8. 8 for 8/32, which indicates it probably was part of a complete set of nut drivers delineated in 30/2 of an inch, I suppose. What it means to me is the red handle nut driver is something I remember from my very earliest days of playing with my father's tool set. And so it will go right here. The next thing we have is a little trim plane. Why he bought this, I don't know. I imagine it was some project where he thought he would need a little small plane. I keep it in the Sunrise Cypress tool chest, and I do occasionally use it. The last thing is his plumb bob. Anybody who knows anything about civil engineers knows that the plumb bob is a sacred emblem for them. It always points towards the center of the earth, which means you always know where you are. And so it will get the place of honor up here at the top. This Father's Day, if your father is still with you, a text is better than nothing. A voice call is better than a text, and nothing beats face to face. If your father's no longer with us, share memories of him, like I did here today. And I appreciate you sharing this memory with me. So this is Bronze Age for the Secret Underground Laboratory Recovery and Salvage. Again, thank you.